Welcome back to another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. I am your host, Howard Holton, and I'm here this week from Sathya from HYCU. Hey Sathya, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today is the close of our Tech Winter Festival, otherwise known as AWS reInvent. 90,000 is the number I was given of attendees.
Yeah,
right? Holy crap!
People were estimating like 60 plus. 90 is a phenomenally high number.
It's huge. I thought it was 70 when I got here, but but I was told 90 after that.
Doesn't surprise me.
Either way,
the entire city seems to be,
carrying around the
AWS badges.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Bellagio's the biggest property here by number of rooms. It's separated by a mall from Venetian, so you can walk from one side to the other. That mall has 25 large restaurants in it, 23 of which were rented by Amazon companies and sponsors yesterday.
Yep.
So you could not get in, you could not go, like, we don't really care. And a ton of restaurants outside of that were also booked and blocked for companies that had reserved them for Amazon. And I've never seen that level of that before.
Yeah, day two, I made the mistake of shuttle was taking a long time, especially this being right after Formula One week, right? And the shuttles were taking a long time, so I decided that, I'll just take an Uber. Ended up paying $77 for a ride that was less than a couple of miles.
Yeah.
So that's the number of people here.
And
it's no easy task to overwhelm Vegas. Vegas is the one that traditionally overwhelms people.
That's
Not
true.
the other way around.
That's true.
But it's a testament to the Winter Tech Festival that we're able to overwhelm the the Vegas infrastructure.
I will say, if you're in Vegas, don't use an Uber. Especially if you're at a casino, hotel, strip property, don't use an Uber. Take a taxi. The taxi drivers know the city better, but also the casino, this is a union town, right?
Yep.
So the casinos are really opposed to Uber and treat the Ubers like second-class citizens.
Yeah.
So you may have to walk, you may have to go to the basement, you may have to do something weird to find the Uber.
Figured that out on day two and walked over here the 30 minutes. It's just much easier and a lot less hassle than standing in for Uber 15 minutes and feeling ripped off.
For sure. So it's been an interesting kind of conference.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting couple of years with the advent of AI and the increase in kind of cyber incidents and how we're seeing kind of fraud develop and entry points and social all of these kind of challenges that we've got to secure, plus we have to make money, plus we've seen market shifts. What's got you excited lately?
Lots of things, but you started talking about cybersecurity. It's certainly one of the big things, right? And what I think people are, last year's keynote, Dr. Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, said everything fails all the time, and that's the assumption you should design your products around.
It's true.
And it's one of those things where you have to prepare for the worst and pray for the best, right? There are so many tools available for cybersecurity today, but yet so many holes. And there has to be. I think everybody's accepting that cybersecurity is a very layered concept. It's not one tool that solves everything. There is no such thing as an impermeable shield.
Sure. It needs to be Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Right? Acknowledge the holes in the layer, put another layer until all of the holes disappear because they're blocked by some other layer.
Yeah, exactly. Except in Swiss cheese block, you can actually see through it and know exactly whether it's blocked or not.
Well,
in our world, you don't know whether it's actually blocked or not.
It's invisible Swiss cheese contained in a black box.
Yeah.
And you don't find out that there's a hole until something goes wrong and the crap's on the floor.
Yeah. So, and that's leading to. I think people are recognizing that there is no one magic solution to security.
Yeah.
And if there's a hole, I think with AI-enabled bad actors are going to find it. So certainly, there needs to be a planning for your worst case. And one of the things that we heard again and again with customers is, hey, suddenly they're talking about backing up things that they just assumed was, hey, it's in the cloud, it was protected, it was the thing you would have heard 3 or 4 years ago so many times. It's finally, I think people are getting to the realization that if it's in the cloud, doesn't imply it's protected. A shared responsibility model was there in so many presentations we saw today. I think Amazon and the cloud providers are doing a great job of explaining to a customer, this is where our line
responsibility
stops,
ends and yours starts.
You stand, and I think that's leading to a lot of the conversations around, hey, I want to protect my data, I want to make sure that I've got at least one copy, I want to own that copy.
Sure.
And I want to be owning that copy in a format that I can use, if something goes wrong. So there's a lot of conversations around open formats as well. So those are the kind of conversations. I think cybersecurity is top of mind, but it's leading to a lot of derivatory conversations.
Well, protect is part of cybersecurity, right? Recover is now part of cybersecurity, right? And so that's a firm acknowledgement within the framework that no matter how good you are, at some point you're not going to be good enough. So make sure you can recover. And I think that's an interesting conversation. And what makes it super interesting is, there are two traditional workloads for backup, all starting from the original workload. The original workload for backup was hardware is unreliable. This stuff is going to fail, and when it fails and falls over, you got to be able to restore it. And it didn't happen so often that we were great at it, but it was a resiliency against hardware failure. And then we went, okay, cool, well, that's actually kind of working okay. It got reasonably reliable. It wasn't perfect, but got reasonably reliable. And we went, well, we still need backup because it could fail, but also 90% of our jobs were restoring from human error. Not malice, just human error. Sometimes there were malice, but most of the part it was just, John deleted a file he didn't mean to delete. Can you restore the file that John deleted, whatever it happened to be, right? And that's really all we've done for, till now, right? For 40 years, almost 50 years. Jeez Louise. Makes me feel old.
There was a presentation today that said 71% of organizations had at least one attack last year.
For sure.
And the other 29 probably didn't notice it.
Right? The other 29 refused to participate in the survey, honestly. Right?
So, those are crazy numbers. And
sure.
Again, just tells you why it's so top of mind for everybody. Even with the GenAI cloud here, cybersecurity is still an area that is top of mind for everybody.
Sure. Everybody's talking about GenAI, including the cybersecurity companies. Right? They're telling you how to protect GenAI, but they're also telling you about how they're integrating GenAI. Right? You can't get away from that. But the reality is, all of this needs to lead to an outcome. GenAI in and of itself is not an outcome. It's a language novelty. What you can do with it to produce an outcome is really interesting and exciting. And how we're kind of looking at cybersecurity today is also really interesting, right? I don't know. Traditionally, we built tools and pieces of software that did discrete things, and now we're seeing a shift in that as well, right?
Great that you pointed it out. One of the things that we talked to a customer recently is that from code to prod, it used to run in their infrastructure castle, right? It's a bunch of rack, it's your thing, and everything ran in there. Now you think about code to prod, see what services you're using. Code is in Git. Your issue tracking system and design documents are in Jira and Confluence probably. Your CI/CD pipeline is probably Circle CI, and you're building the code, and then your infrastructure is created by Terraform.
Sure.
And it's sitting in EC2.
One cloud, another cloud, another cloud, accessing a service in another cloud, accessing a service from another SaaS service, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like we didn't just break this down into microservices.
Yeah.
And we didn't distribute this in things we control. We distributed this in things we have absolutely no control over whatsoever.
Yeah. And so when you think about it previously, because everything was in one castle and people were protecting it, and it did have one point of entry for a lot of companies, and it's a point of entry that people, not that there were great tools to protect. I'm pretty sure it would be easier to hack into something as it existed 5 years ago, right? There is just so much improvements that has happened.
I'm not sure that's true. Because you actually had a defined perimeter before cloud.
Yeah.
Right? And so the defined perimeter meant what was inside the perimeter was probably way easier to hack. But there were so many fewer entry points.
Yeah,
I could actually keep track of all the entry points, and I could block the entry points.
Yeah, that's exactly my point as well. You had there was a gateway, and that gate is something that you could protect. Now with all of these services, you've got a 3,000-mile border all of a sudden, and you can't just build a wall or a gate in there, right? So that's a big perimeter, and people are seeing exposure. I mean, we ran a state of SaaS resilience survey only a few months ago, and 60% of cyber attacks happened from credentials that were used with as-a-service platforms. And I mean, AWS is the innovator of as-a-service models, right? And so when you use so many services, your attack surface just becomes so large, and you need to be able to protect it. And again, those are all things that I think if you had asked me 2 years ago or to reinvent, people talking about protecting what is in SaaS, I'd be like, that's not a market.
Right.
Now suddenly we're hearing from everybody that, hey, I not only want to protect this, I want to protect my Git, I want to protect my Terraform, I want to protect my Circle CI and my BigQuery or Redshift and
everything
and everything, right?
I want to protect everything, but here's the hard part: I want to do it in one platform.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have the operating overhead.
Yeah.
The free space within my operating model, my people, my process, and my tools to go, I'm gonna add another backup and recovery tool. I'm gonna add another backup and recovery tool, or 3 or 4 to protect all my services, right? Look at MGM. Like, we're here in Vegas, so let's look at MGM, right? Their recovery from cyber attack was extended by 3 weeks because their recovery procedures were so complex. The documentation was digital only, and it was stored somewhere they got ransomware, right? So their whole environment, including their recovery procedures, was lost.
Yeah, and there was another angle to it. Their entry point for where it all went wrong was their IAM systems.
Yep.
And not a lot of people protect IAM systems either, right? Now there is a lot of companies, not just us, I think, are releasing Entra ID support because suddenly people realizing, well, that's the gateway. We added Okta support not too long ago, and Okta was the gateway for what happened at MGM, a few months ago, right? So people, I think it is a lot more intuitive for people to think, hey, I want to protect my data. And I think we've beaten it down into IT folks that you need to protect your infrastructure. But suddenly people are realizing that, hey, I not only need to protect my data and infrastructure, I need to protect my IP, which is often the source code, and I also need to protect my identity because that's where everything starts.
And if my identity is compromised and I don't catch it and I don't protect it, how can I actually be sure after I recover that I'm not still backdoored? Yeah. Right. Because if I'm an attacker and I do some credential theft and I do some credential pivot and I escalate to admin, I'm also going to find those it's really easy to run a query and see what are the accounts that haven't been used in 90 days. Great. I'm going to change 22 passwords, and then I'm going to elevate their privileges. And since no one's used it, and once I change 22 passwords, they're not going to.
Yep.
If they don't immediately respond, then they don't notice. I now have 22 admin accounts.
Yeah.
The one I'm using now gets found. Cool. I got 21 more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those could sit dormant for months.
That's
right.
true.
Like the old stat was an attacker was in 180 days before they executed a ransomware attack. So it's no longer 180 days, but it's probably not zero.
Yep.
Right. So
and you still have so many services that. Again, I come from the world of data protection, right? So you still have so many services that has a time to live of like 7 days. So the records only sit there for 7 days, and after that they start expiring. 7 days is not a long time, and in fact, you think 180 days and 7 days, the difference is so much.
It's huge.
And most ransomware attacks don't become obvious within the first 7 days. They take time. And sometimes you have to actually hear it 2 or 3 times from the hacker before you start taking someone seriously and realizing that you are actually under attack, right? And that's why I think, but this is also where I think a lot of regulations are starting to do a really good job. You've probably heard of DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act in Europe, and they are basically mandating that you need to have a logically separate copy, a physically separate copy for all of your customer data and so on. And their job is to make sure they're creating a safe place for your data sets, and people aren't being held ransom for your data. So these regulations are also, I think, helping people.
I mean, I think they help. I think they help slightly more than they hurt. Slightly.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a customer. I had a dinner with them yesterday. A fintech customer. They are preparing for these regulations like a year ahead. They're saying, hey, some of them are going live next year. There was a funny story they mentioned is, and talking about regulations, and sometimes they're always intended to help, but they don't always end up helping. This is a customer that was they were in the fintech space, and they're trying to get PCI compliant, and they don't even store any credit card information. But if they want to do business with banks, you have to be PCI compliant.
Right. So how do you certify your PCI compliance
when you're
not connecting card information?
Yeah. So they're going through a whole bunch of documentation and to become compliant while actually not.
Well, to certify their compliance, because they are compliant.
Yeah.
They just have to certify
compliance is in the process. They also have to produce a lot of. If you get it, what will you do with it? And all these.
Kind of, but not really. So when you look at the regulation, it's different than looking at the execution, right? HIPAA is the world's greatest example. Right? The law for HIPAA says you must take reasonable precautions. End law. They don't define reasonable precautions. For good reason. The easiest good reason is they didn't know what reasonable precautions were and knew anything they said today would change tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? At the same time, they don't know what reasonable precautions are.
Yeah.
And since they didn't define them and they're not codified, you have a million consulting companies that say we'll certify you as being HIPAA compliant by doing these 373 things. Well, none of those things are legally required to be HIPAA compliant, but that's what they've decided to do. Right? And so
these regulations are doing one job really well, which is to bring awareness to the problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Right?
Yeah,
and I think, I think they all start from a place of good.
Yeah.
I think where the problem occurs is when people who shouldn't be involved in the process start consulting.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're like, well, we can make a lot of money doing this. Let's go do that.
Yeah.
And they tend to forget that we need to start from a position of reasonability.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Tech has generally done a better job of staying away from PowerPoint consultants and practitioner consultants.
I mean, if
better.
that was true, you wouldn't have Bain and BCG and all these companies making billions of dollars off of the tech industry itself. I don't mean consulting with end users on tech. I mean consulting with large tech companies.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
But at the same time, you're also seeing billion-dollar organizations and do-its and traditional value-added resellers that are actually playing a role in services and so on as well. So it's not that the big fours or the MBBs or as they call them, they aren't the ones cornering the market. I think there are other industries like healthcare and so on. I think they probably have a much higher proportion of consulting.
Yeah, probably.
Then I think we've done. I feel like our community needs to be given a little bit of credit.
Nope.
On saying.
Nope. You get
practitioners.
No credit. You get no credit.
Practitioners have actually been central to a lot of decision making.
I mean, if that was true, you wouldn't have so many companies run by MBAs. MBAs are not practitioners.
I'm an MBA, but I'm also an engineer.
Right. So you started as an engineer and added it so that you could have a certain conversation.
Yeah.
Right. There are a tremendous number of pure MBAs. There is a extremely large 4-letter tech company that produces data center equipment that is all run by MBAs. IBM traditionally is all MBAs. Right. Like the half of them that is engineering does not come close to the half of them in leadership that are MBAs.
Yeah.
Right, and
even there,
you can kind of see what's happening.
Arvind is not a traditional MBA today, so even there, Ginny,
well, IBM
Ginny
has
wasn't.
IBM
Ginny
has
was an
changed so
engineer.
much.
Ginny was an engineer too.
Years over year,
right?
Year over year, it's not funny, but
so the last couple of leadership have, at least at the very top.
Sure, I'm talking middle management.
Yeah. So there's a path dependency too. Yeah,
it's not necessary. The number of times that I've sat in a room with a mid-management MBA and went, that guy's really got his shit together. It still hasn't happened, so I'll let you know if it does. That doesn't mean that I haven't been in rooms with MBAs that really did, but they were not middle management MBAs, right? Watching a company circle the drain.
Probably that's what is contributing to everybody. Like to go back to some of the conversations that are happening here. Like everybody wanted to be a Jedi Master, now everybody wants to be a Genai Master.
Right, that's very true.
Right, and everybody just wants a chatbot. I'm like, come on, that's not all Gen AI, right?
Well, no, but it's a really good place to start too.
Yeah.
Right. I think in 10 years computers won't look like they do today. Right. I think in 10 years we're going to communicate with a computer using natural language and nothing else.
Yeah.
Right. There'll be some visualization, but the visualization will be a result of natural language.
Yeah.
There's very little worse than going, hey, why don't you guys have this feature? No, we do have that feature. Yeah, but I can't find it. That won't be an issue.
As you said, it's a great starting point.
You're
not going to become Gen AI master by doing just chatbots.
No.
A
master becomes a master by becoming a Padawan first.
Exactly. But one of the things that we found is, they're good at generating, right? It should be good at generating code as well.
Right.
In one of our innovations in kind of incorporating Gen AI is, can it write backup plugins? You create a platform.
Sure.
Because in steady state, our belief is that platforms will be the ones that are successful. Plugins will eventually get consolidated into platforms. And so you build a platform, and this is the journey that we've been in the last year. We built a platform, and then we basically said, hey, can I create a low-code platform and have AI assist creation of plugins to various SaaS services? In fact, that's how we ended up adding 80 plus workloads. And 80 plus workload support is not something that is normal in the data protection industry, but that's been possible because of Gen AI. So I think people are really thinking about, okay, go past Chat GPT and a chatbot. Where else can I use it? And the other thing I noticed is at the conference, just so much attention on the $8 billion investment, data processing, machine learning. So there's a top of the stack attention, But what I think people have also missed is all the changes that are happening at the bottom of the stack to enable this Gen AI use cases, right? I can give you a couple of examples. One is take S3 as a service. S3 is, in terms of storage, like it's where the data sits, right? And that's where everything starts from. And at the very root, you're seeing S3 service announce S3 metadata, which essentially says, hey, you can now add real-time metadata to the data that you're creating. So if your LLM creates, if you've got certain models creating certain data sets, you can tag them, you can easily search them, and you can get metadata search instead of having to go look through every blocks and so on. So fast, they're creating an organization system that allows these LLM models to be successful.
What's funny is custom metadata is the reason I went to work for Hitachi in the first place. So their HCP, their object storage, had a extensible metadata system to it where you could create up to 1,000 custom metadata fields. And as someone that's spent his entire life in IT maintaining applications that were dead except for some view, I'm like, that's just metadata. Like, let's get the data out, let's metadata tag it, so that you can then search and find it based on the metadata tags. Metadata can be far more valuable than the data itself, right? Let's do that. Let's leverage it. And I built a relatively early e-discovery tool that just used the native pieces of that object store as the data repository. So then it was just the data itself, the metadata, and effectively a visualization front end. It's wicked simple, right? You decide you don't like one piece of it, you just swap the pieces out, and it doesn't really matter, right? I go to work for Hitachi. I'm huge on this, and they're like, yeah, nobody buys it for that. They just buy it as a backup target. I'm like, how are you missing the most valuable piece of the entire component? And then they released a new version that doesn't have any of those features. It's neat to see Amazon going, what's really smart? Let's add a custom metadata system to our object store. I'm like,
I have a very similar version. We were building a catalog for large unstructured data sets and so on. But we were essentially just building catalog and index and so on, right? So this is, I'm talking 2016, so 8-9 years ago. And we built this cataloging engine, and the feedback we kept receiving is nobody buys a catalog. People buy from a catalog, right? Nobody buys a catalog. Catalog's not what you can make money on, and we were asked to kind of move up stack in terms of what we could do. But now you're saying, hey, metadata is very, very important to be able to process all this data at a very high performance and speed, and without actually using as much compute capacity as you would need. So you're saying S3 metadata service. They announced S3 tables, basically allowing people to store iceberg format tables on S3 to make analysis faster. I think the query performance is like 3x and processing performance like 10x. Again, you don't. I mean, these are all Gen AI. This thing, people don't. LLM and foundation models have gotten all of the attention.
For sure.
But even at the bottom of the stack, you're seeing, and us data protection companies, we're also kind of looking at, hey, there's a lot of data transforming, and our job as insurance for data is to follow wherever the data is. If people are suddenly buying a lot of houses in the beach area, we need to evaluate our risk profile and create plans for them, right? So same thing with data. We're seeing a lot of changes going into to enable these Gen AI cases. Some are very short-lived. Another thing we heard from S3 team is S3 Express One Zone. Very high performance, but carries a higher failure domain. It's just one zone. It's not even three. Each region has 3 availability zones, and you've got that protection. But these Express One Zone is just one zone, so higher failure domain. But data is coming in and going out very quickly, and we need to grab them before we need to grab them and copy them before they disappear.
Right, to enable the data operations that are necessary that you otherwise wouldn't have time to. So we have to build a really fast, somewhat fragile, somewhat risky, but as long as you're using it for what it's supposed to be used for, those risks don't matter, that failure doesn't matter, that fragility doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right?
And happening at the warehouse and data lake side as well.
Right.
Lake houses are a new concept you probably
I hate
heard.
the idea of lake house.
As well. But again, if that's what people are creating to be able to...
But a data lake house exists because we fucked up the data lake. Data lakes would have been fine, except we decided we didn't have to do data quality, and we just threw a bunch of crap in there and we made a data swamp. And so they went, well, I mean, sure, it's a swamp at this level, but this piece of the lake is good, so we'll build a lake house to just address that piece. And you're like, how about we just do it right the first time? Right? How about we just do the hard thing one time? Because eventually, we're just stacking crap on top of crap on top of crap.
Yeah.
It's all going to come tumbling down.
Yeah.
And AI really makes it clear that we should have done data quality as well as we did janitorial services in our offices 30 years ago.
Exactly.
Like if that had been part of our culture, and culturally we just said, no. Data quality, we solved that in 1987, and we've just been doing that correctly since.
Yeah.
All of this stuff would be easier.
I think we were talking about this. we were talking about this off camera before we started this. Like a lot easier to solve problems in the LLM type and learning area than it is to solve some of the problems, down stack.
Yeah, the fundamental ones, right?
And durability, consistency, organization of data, data quality. I mean, those are all important pieces. And I think that's the main thing I was trying to. There's a lot of attention on the training aspects, the foundation model. Hey, I can get a bigger, a lot more prompt cache than at a lower price point. I mean, these are all
for sure
got a lot of the attention, but I think there is a lot happening at the infrastructure and the data stack.
Yeah, there's a ton, but we're not focused on it, right? Because it's also really complex.
Yeah.
Right. You have to to understand what's going on and why it makes a difference. You have to have understood what it was doing before and why that made a difference.
Yeah.
And what the shortcomings were to be able to put that together. Otherwise, you just kind of go, okay.
Yep.
Right. Like it gets hand wavy, and you don't want to be hand wavy. It's not a good place to be hand wavy.
Yep. And so again, from the perspective of a data protection expert in the conference here, I can see where the data is going there. A lot of data going to get positioned for training and becomes a high level of importance. I mean, there's not a lot of regulations yet on that space on saving training data and so on, but I think it's a matter of time before more regulations in that space will come as well. And so we're watching that space and making sure, we are data protection systems can accommodate those shifting data sets. Because at the end of the day, our job is to follow wherever the data goes.
For sure. You have to be there.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that's interesting while you were talking, if you think about like data catalogs, if you think about that new metadata layer that Amazon has added, and we go back to kind of chatbots and how chatbots are like the easy thing that everybody thinks about, a really, really good use for AI is overcoming the problem that caused us to disregard metadata management and data catalogs to begin with, which is the hard human work to do data classification because regex just isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Right? But Gen AI is.
Yeah.
Gen AI is really good.
Gen AI could actually be the one that adds all the metadata
Correct.
that we've been talking about, right? Do it once, process it.
You could easily build a job that processes the data that goes there and goes, once it hits here, run this job to look for anything that looks like a credit card number, anything that looks like PIA, anything that looks like whatever, and then add the appropriate metadata tags. And it could be really, really good and in a relatively short amount of time because there's processing time and cost associated with it. You could have a very thorough metadata catalog.
Yeah. And if you're processing the data anyway,
correct,
there is no additional cost to just like very minimal cost.
Well, you would mitigate the cost.
Yeah, mitigate
right. It wouldn't be zero, but you would mitigate the cost. Right. And at the end of it, like the beauty of well cleansed tagged data is you're able to extract all the value from it all the time. Not some of it, but you become aware of so much more value. And the cool part is, if that becomes part of your kind of corporate culture again, and your data culture, as you find new use cases for new pieces of data, you go, cool, now that I know what that use case is, now I know what to look for in all of my other data to pull out every time that use case would appear. Right? And so the derivative value of all of that effort becomes multiplied because now you've actually moved that front and center.
Yeah. And to go back to the very beginning of our conversation, now that data is in so many places across so many services, not just your Amazon infrastructure.
Right.
Of course, there's a lot of infrastructure as a service and platform as a service that you're consuming through Amazon, but that's part of your data. And at HYCU, we believe that data is now everywhere, right? So we're trying to make sure that we create a system where we're capturing all of these data sets. We're capturing everything in your DevOps, like look through the various places where we're expanding. We're basically saying all popular solutions in DevOps, we want to go capture all of those data sets. All popular identity solutions. We started with Okta, we added Entra, and we added AWS IAM. And there is at least another 4 identity providers.
Sure. You're not
pretty
done.
Big, right? So in SaaS, I mean, there's so many SaaS services. AT is already 5 times more than what anybody else does, but AT is probably 1/5 of what matters to the 80 to get to even 80-20 rule. You probably have to do 5 times more. So it's a journey. We're doing for DevOps, we're doing for identity, we're doing for productivity suites. We also got a lot of collaboration data sets. It starts with the mother of all SaaS, M365 and Google Workspace type workloads and Box and all of that too. So, but your data is sitting in all of these places. And we see a central role for the backup players as an excellent way to aggregate that data and actually present it back for training. So it's, I don't need to be the GenAI master but if I can enable a whole bunch of GenAI masters, there is certainly good and wisdom from that.
Yeah, 100%, right? Today is absolutely, if you haven't been doing it well before, today is absolutely the best day to get your house in order when it comes to data protection. And data protection is not about the backup, it's about the restore.
Yeah.
Right? Because to restore, you have to have already backed it up.
Yeah.
But if you haven't tested your restore, if you haven't validated your restore, and if you haven't validated the restore works in the amount of time to the restore point that you've promised, that you need, that matters for your business, then it's still not a restore. You still haven't done the job. Right? Get that down, get that working, and then expand east and west through your entire data estate and make sure you've got control over that. The features that are going to be added there are really phenomenal value for all customers. And you must make that copy. So how do you leverage that copy? So you're not making other copies and other copies and other copies and other copies. Remember, backup only works with lineage information, and that lineage information becomes really critical and really valuable. And so it is a good time to look at your backup vendors and see kind of what are they doing to enable the kind of workloads of the future. If you ignore them, you're going to add a lot more overhead to do what they may already be doing or be working on. It's a good time to have that conversation. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
This is good.
Again, to hear from your perspectives of having done metadata work in the past and cybersecurity work in the past.
Again, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've lived through this, right? And I know the beard already tells everyone that, but to be able to hear from you is also fantastic. Well, so thank you for having me.
It works the other way as well. I learn from every single one of these conversations. The depth of knowledge gets a little deeper. The perspective expands significantly from every one of them. So this has been great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again. This has been an excellent episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow, share, and we'll see you on our next episode.